Same stuff.
I mean, you have a vehicle, it just doesn't know anything on it.
Yeah, I do. I have a third,
But.
I have a good.
I never invited us. They are. And then not this.
Yeah.
The house is over here, so the school's over here. Mine's daddy. So that it's gotta be paid back. What is it? And you're missing the. You're missing the. Yeah.
I was wondering. What?
Today's lesson, you guys, so it's not that it's hard, it's just that it's long. I think this takes a while.
You can go easy, but easy.
We have a worksheet. We actually have a focus sign.
So, is that like the problem take a long time to do?
What? More like I talked for, it seemed third hour, like I talked forever.
Oh, geez.
I know.
Probably
I respond this.
should skip some problems.
Let's do it. Oh, that's. You felt good.
Well, like, do you need it?
Yeah.
You can use that, so you don't recognize.
How is my brother, that's why I'm sitting up. It does get out.
Like, what are your?
So can you take my garbage?
Yeah. Here you go.
Is there an extra?
Yeah.
They said just after the.
Two. Okay, and you can set it on my chair.
All right, guys. So we're gonna get started, and today we are going to, I'm actually recording today because my third hour video didn't record, just so you are aware of that.
Like, are you recording right now?
Yeah.
I do not give you your, never mind.
You don't give me your
Yeah, that's-
permission to record.
Yeah, that's why I said never mind. I didn't want to start.
All right. So what we are going to do today, you guys, is start something that we're going to be doing for several days, and that is showing that two triangles are congruent. And when you do that, when two triangles are congruent, so you know what it kind of looks like, you can have triangle like A, B, C congruent to triangle D, E, F. And what they'll do, if angles A and D are congruent, they'll use one arc. If angle B and E are congruent, they'll use two arcs. And C and F are congruent, they'll use three arcs. Then the same thing with sides. If these two sides are congruent, they'll use one dash. If these two are, they'll use two. And if those two are, then they'll use three. So for two triangles to be congruent, you need 6 things that are congruent, okay? You need 3 pairs of angles and 3 pairs of sides. Make sure that everybody is paying attention, please, okay? All right, so if we look here, please notice that angle A and angle H each have 2 arcs. That would mean these 2 angles are congruent, okay? Notice that B and J each have 1 arc, so that means those 2 angles are congruent. And C and K each have 3 arcs, So that means those two angles are congruent. Then if we look, notice how AB has one dash and HJ has one dash. Because of that, that would mean that those two sides are congruent. Notice how BC has two dashes and KJ or JK, you could name that either way, has two dashes. So those two are congruent. And then AC has three dashes as well as KH. So those two are congruent. Okay. Now, when we go to write that two triangles are congruent, it's called a congruent statement. And what you would do is start with one of the two angles, okay? You can just set it right there, that's perfect. All right, so when you go to write this, you would start with one of the triangles. And then usually what I do when I'm deciding like how to write the angles is I start with the angle with one arc, then two, then three. Okay, so I would say BAC is congruent to triangle. And then I would go from the angle with one arc to two to three on this one. So we'd say triangles JHK. All right, so make sure everybody is watching. I can tell some of you are not, and you're going to regret that. Because this is something you have to know for this whole chapter. So one of the first things that they'll do is give you two congruent triangles, and you have to list all the congruent angles. How you do that, this part isn't too bad. Notice how angle A and angle X each have one arc. You would just say angle A is congruent to angle X. Then notice B and Y each have two arcs. So we'd say angle B is congruent to angle Y. And then C and Z both have three arcs. So we'd say angle C is congruent to angle Z. Okay. When you're listing the sides, what you're going to do is list them as segments. And usually where I'll start is I'll list the side that has one dash and the side here that has one dash. And I would say segment AB is congruent to segment XY. Okay. Then I would go to the sides that have two dashes and I'd say BC is congruent to YZ. And if I said YZ and you guys said segment ZY, that's the same thing. Okay. So YZ or ZY are the same. And then to name the last side, notice AC has three dashes and XZ also does. So I'd say segment AC is congruent to segment XZ. Okay. Now what we have to do is write what's called a congruent statement. And when we do that, we're going to start with one of the triangles. Okay. And it doesn't matter which one. And it also doesn't matter what order you choose for the first one. What I would do is I'd choose one of them and I would go from the angle with one arc to two to three. So I'm going to call this triangle ABC. So notice I went from the angle with one arc to two arcs to three arcs. And then I would say that is congruent to triangle XYZ. So it has one arc, two arcs, three arcs. So XYZ. And it's important that you guys know this is not the only answer. I happened to start with this triangle. You could have started with this one. That would have been fine. I went from the angle with one arc to two to three. You could have gone from 3 to 2 to 1. As long as you're consistent with the other triangle, that would be fine. Okay. So now if we go to this page, I'm gonna be showing you guys some things today that we're gonna be using the next week or so. And we're gonna be doing some proofs, and they're a little bit harder than what the algebra proofs were, if you guys remember that, a couple weeks ago. But I'm gonna be showing you guys some steps today that are very common in this chapter. Okay, so pay attention to that. So first of all, here we're gonna list what angles are congruent. So I'm gonna say angle A has one arc and so does D. So angle A is congruent to angle D. Now, notice this angle has two arcs as well as that does. But I cannot call this angle B because you wouldn't know if I meant this angle, or the whole angle. So when I name this, I have to use three letters and B would be in the middle. So I could name it angle ABC or CBA. So I'm going to say angle ABC. And then that's equal to this one. I also cannot use angle C to name this because you wouldn't know if I meant this one, or the whole angle. So again, I have to use three letters. So I could say angle DCB or BCD. Either of those would be okay. They'd be in the same angle. Then, which one am I missing? A, B, C, and D, C, B. Now I have to do the ones with the three, okay? So if I go to name this one maybe, okay, that has three dashes, I have to use three letters again. So I could say angle DBC is congruent to, and when I do this one, it would be angle ACB or BCA. I'd have to use those three letters again. Now I'm going to list the congruent sides. And when I go to do that, again, what I'm going to look at is how many dashes they have. So notice that side AB has one dash, as well as side DC has. So you'd say AB is congruent to DC. Then notice that BD and AC have two dashes. So I can say segment BD is congruent to segment AC. Now, I still need one more side. And this is a super common step in this chapter. Do you guys see how these two triangles share the same side? Okay. I can mark that side. And a really common step that's going to be used tomorrow when we do these proofs is if two triangles share a side, you're going to say BC is congruent to itself, and that is called reflexive property. Reflexive property is going to be super common in our proofs. So now I can say BC is congruent to BC. Okay. Now I have to write a congruence statement, and you're going to start at one of the two triangles. It does not matter which one you do. Say that I start at this one down here. I always go from the angle with one arc to 2 to 3. So I would call that triangle ABC is congruent to triangle. And then you'd go from one arc to 2 to 3. So DCB. Okay. Then if we go down here, another super common thing that we're going to learn in the next week in our proofs is any time that you see arrows on lines. Do you guys know what those arrows mean? The arrows mean the lines are parallel. Perfect. Now, in this chapter, anytime lines are parallel, you're going to think of alternate interior angles all the time. Don't think of consecutive interior, alternate exterior, or corresponding, just alternate interior. Now, do you guys get if these two lines are parallel? Can you tell those two are alternate interior? Okay, so we're gonna say that. We're gonna say angle LKM, we have to use 3 letters, is congruent to angle JMK. Okay, then for the other one, notice these two are parallel because they each have 2 arrows. So that means these 2 lines are parallel, and that would make this angle be congruent with that angle, which is again because of alternate interior angles. So when I go to name these, I'm going to say angle JKM. JKM is congruent to angle, and then I'm going to do LMK. LMK. Right? Now, there's also a theorem that we'll talk about a little bit, not very much, that if you know that 2 angles in one triangle are congruent to 2 angles of a second triangle, the third angles are also congruent. It's not something we use very much at all, but that is true. So now I could say angle J is congruent to angle L. Okay. Now what they're asking me to do is write down my congruent sides. And notice that KL, segment KL, has 1 dash as well as JM does. So those 2 are congruent. Then notice that KJ and LM are congruent. So I can say KJ is congruent to LM. Now, if you guys notice, these 2 triangles share this side. So what that means is I can say KM is congruent to itself, KM. Do you guys remember what that's going to be called in a proof? Reflexive property. Very good. Now, the last thing that I have to do here is I have to write a congruence statement. And it's important that you guys understand that there's different ways you could write this. So I could start at 1 triangle, and I can go from M to K to J. So triangle MKJ would be congruent to, and then if I went to this one, it would be KML. KML. So notice I went from 1 to 2 to 3, and then from 1 arc to 2 to 3 when I did those. All right, so now let's go to this page, and this is what the second part of your assignment is going to look like, where they give you 2 polygons, and they give you a congruent statement, okay? Now, if you notice, we want to find what X is, and X is angle A. What this expression is for is angle A. And up in this congruent statement, notice A is first. That would tell us that A is equal to P because P is first. So A is 2x plus 4. That's going to equal angle P over here, which is 100. And then I can just go ahead and solve that to find what X is. So I would subtract 4, and I would get 2x equals 96, divide by 2, and X would be 48. Okay. Then we also have, I think this should say Y. Okay. Now we have to find Y. And notice that Y is the side DC or CD. which are the last two letters of this congruent statement. So that means it would be equal to RS. CD and RS come last for those two. They would be equal. So CD is 3y minus 3. That's going to equal RS over here, which is 12. Okay, everybody understand that? So now that I know that, I can go ahead and solve this. So I'm going to add 3. And I get 3y equals 15. Divide by 3. And y is 5. Now if I go down here, notice in this one, we have two different things with x's. One is LM, and notice L and M are the first two letters here. They're going to equal QR because they're the first two letters. So that means these two sides are equal, and they both have an X. So all I do is set those two equal to each other. So I'd say 2x plus 11 equals 3x minus 9. And then I would go ahead and use algebra to solve. So I'm going to bring this 2x over. And I would get 11 equals 3x minus 2x is x minus 9. And then I'm going to add 9. And I would get x is 20. So that goes right here. Now I have to find y. And notice angle M has a y in it. Angle M is my middle letter here. So that's going to equal angle R because they're both in the middle. So that means this angle M, which is y plus 10, is going to equal angle R, which is 2y minus 40. And then we go ahead and solve that. So I'm going to bring this y over. And I bring the 10 down. 2y minus y is y minus 40. And then I'm going to add 40. And I get y is 50. So this is 50. Okay. Now watch this because you have quite a few questions in your assignment today that are like this. So here's what they're telling us. We have two different triangles that are congruent. So you're going to draw two triangles. Now they're saying this one is ABC. So I'm going to go A here, B here, and C here. And the order I did that is the same order I'm going to do D, E, F. So I'm going to put the D here, the E here, and the F there. So I have that. Now what I'm going to do is write what they're giving us. And they tell me that side AB is 7. Side BC down here is 9. And side AC is 11 plus X. Then over here, DF, which is right over here, is 3x minus 13. And DE over here is 2y minus 5. Now, honestly, the way I wrote this and set this up, this side and this side should be equal. And I can check because notice this side is AB, which is the first two letters. And this side is DE, which is the first two letters. So they are equal. So I can solve for y by setting this 2y minus 5 equal to 7. So I'd add 5. And I get 2y equals 12. Divide by 2. And y is 6. And if I go back up, I still have to solve for my x, okay? Now, again, if the way I set this up, this should equal this, okay? And if you notice, this side is AC, which is my first and last side. That would equal DF. And this is AC, and that's DF. So they should be equal. So then I can say 11 plus X equals 3X minus 13. Then I'm going to bring the X over here by subtracting it. And I get 11 equals 3X minus X is 2X minus 13. Then I'm going to add 13. And I get 2X equals 24. Divide by 2. And X is 12. So that's my other answer. So X is 12 and Y is 6. Now let's go to this page and notice here we have a Y in this one and we have an X and a Y in this one. I want to start with the one that only has one variable, which is this angle D. Notice angle D comes first, so that's going to equal angle A. So I can say my 2y minus 5 is going to equal angle A right here, which is 65. And that's because they both come first. So then I'm going to solve that. And I get 2y equals 70. Divide by 2, and y is 35. Okay, now I have to still solve for my y. And notice the y is over here, and that's side EF. EF is the last two letters of that, so it's going to equal BC. So EF is going to equal BC. So I can write 2x plus y is going to equal 90.6. Now you can never solve an individual equation with two variables, but we know what our y is. We know that it's 35, so we can substitute that in there. And now we only have one variable, so we can solve it. So I'm going to subtract 35. And I get 2x equals, I believe that's 55.6. And then I'd have to divide by 2. And I believe that that is 27.8. All right, so now let's go down here. Now notice how this one, we have an angle F that has a Y in it. This has an X and a Y. So I don't want to start here because there's two variables. I want to start here. So angle F right here is in the middle. So that's going to equal angle B. So I can say that this equals 99. So 8y minus 5 is going to equal 99 because they both come in the middle. Then I'm going to add 5. And I get 8y equals 104. Divide by 8. And y would be 13, I believe. So that's that answer. Now, notice I have EF or FE, and it has an X and a Y. EF or FE is the last two. That's going to equal BC over here. So this side is going to equal that side. So I know that 2y plus X is going to equal the 38.4. And I just found that y is 13. So I can put that in here. And then solve it. 2 times 13 is 26 plus x is 38.4. And then I'm going to subtract 26. And I get x equals 12.4. So that would go right here. All right, I think we have one more page. You guys have two, or you might have a couple of pages at the end we don't do, we just do this page. Okay, so if you guys look at this, I'm not sure if you can see this or not, but there's a little congruent mark here. So would you guys get that y would equal 48? Yep. So this is 48. Okay. Now angle F would equal angle A because they come first. So what we could say then is 2x minus y is going to equal this angle. Well, right now we don't know what that angle is, but if I know these two angles, could I find that?
Yep.
Don't I add these together and subtract from 180? If I take 108 plus 48, that's 156. And if I take 180 minus 156, that's 24. So now the 2x minus y equals 24. And I know that y is 48. So I can write this as 2x minus 48 equals 24. And then just go ahead and use algebra to solve it. So I get 2x equals 72, divide by 2, and x is 36. Okay. Now, if I look at this one, when I went to mark this, I couldn't make curved arcs here. So this really means like this angle and that angle are equal. Okay. So if this is 2x, do you guys get that that would be 2x?
Yeah.
Now, what do we know about these two angles? Why? They're vertical angles. They are the same. So this is 40. Very good. Now, I still need to find x. So do you guys get that I could add these three angles together? And what could I set them equal to? Equals 180. And why 180? Isn't that what the three angles in a triangle add up to?
Yep.
Right? So 2x plus 2x is 4x plus 40 equals 180. Then we're going to subtract 40. And we get 4x equals 140. Divide by 4. And x is 35. One more, and then I'm done. Okay, in this one, you guys might have the same exact problem in your homework, so make sure you write this down. This is hard for you to see, but this angle and this angle are equal, and this angle and this angle are equal. Okay, so what that would mean is this angle would be equal to this angle. Okay, so what I could do is if this is 4x, that would mean this is 4x. Okay, now what do you know about these three angles if they add up to? So I can say 4x plus 51 plus 65 equals 180. Now, 51 plus 65 is 116. And then you're going to subtract 116. And we get 4x equals 64. divide by 4, and x is 16. And if you see anything today that says explain your reasoning, you do not have to do that. All right, so your assignment is out of the book. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 problems.